Kennedy of Louisiana.
Hello, hello, Judge. If you are a lawyer or an American, I guess it doesn't get any bigger or better than this. Congratulations. In addition to honoring the wonderful state of Minnesota, and unless you correct me, I am going to assume that your purple attire is also meant to honor LSU in my state. And if I squint real hard, I might call it Marion blue, the colors of my Southern University in Louisiana. I want to compliment you and the Biden White House for selecting Senator Doug Jones to advise you. Senator Jones knows the Senate, and the Senate knows Senator Jones. And we know him to be quite the intellect, but more important, we know him to be a person of good judgment and goodwill. And I'm glad that you've been listening to him. I hope we will be able to use this hearing today to talk about, if not implicitly, at least implicitly, two subjects. The first is the legitimacy of the United States Supreme Court. Where does the court get its legitimacy? What can we do to enhance it? Judicial legitimacy is important. I don't need to tell you that. I'm rather fond of the Constitution. I know you are too. When members of the United States Supreme Court interpret it, I want the American people to believe them. I want the American people to say, well, I may not agree, but the men and women who made that decision are intellectually honest and people of good faith. One of the primary roles of the United States Supreme Court is to uphold the rule of law. And sometimes justices have to uphold the rule of law when it's not popular. Sometimes justices have to uphold the rule of law when it's not popular with the majority of Americans. Boy, that's tough. It's also important. Sometimes, not generally, but sometimes the majority can mean that just all the fools are on the same side. And that's what the court's there for. And I'm rather fond of the Bill of Rights, too, and I know you are as well. I've never believed that the Bill of Rights was there for the high school quarterback or the prom queen. They're covered by it. But the Bill of Rights is there to protect the rights of people who don't see the world exactly like everybody else, or who don't look exactly like everybody else. Now, unfortunately, through history, we have had people, some well-intentioned, who tried to delegitimize the Supreme Court. We had a president way back when who tried to impeach a Supreme Court justice. We had another president who wanted to pack the court. I remember the impeach Earl Warren signs in the Warren Court. And most of the people who want to delegitimize the Supreme Court believe that unlike our founders, in my judgment, believe that that members of the Supreme Court ought to be and are politicians in robes. They believe that the United States Supreme Court ought to be a mini Congress. They believe that the law is not the law. The law is supposed to just be politics practiced in a different way. And they believe in court packing. And they're wrong. Number two, I hope today that we can use this as an opportunity to talk about, if not explicitly, at least implicitly, that's what I'm going to try to do, the appropriate balance between representative government and declarative government. Now, in representative government, as you well know, people, through their elected representatives, make policy. In declarative government, policy is made by the unelected, the administrative state, and the federal judiciary. Now, both are important. Both are important. I'm not saying this is a zero-sum game or either or. But what's just as important is we have the appropriate balance between representative government and what I'll call declarative government. I mean, we have an administrative state. Did any of us ever think it would get this big? Is that healthy? We need to ask ourselves that. Is it really healthy to arrive at a circumstance where the administrative state passes 35 laws a year to our one? Is it really healthy to have an administrative state that makes its own laws, interprets its own laws, and enforces its own laws before courts, with respect to which the administrative state appoints the judges? I think that's a fair question to ask. In terms of, with respect to declarative government in the Supreme Court and the federal judiciary, federal judges have enormous power. They have to, but they do. They have enormous power. You're appointed for life. You can't be unelected. Your salary can't even be reduced. And you have to have that power. Judicial power is important. So is judicial restraint. I believe that the appropriate role of the federal judiciary is the following. Federal judges don't make law. They don't tell us what the law ought to be. They tell us what the law is. Now, I said primarily because, of course, sometimes federal judges make law. I mean, you make the law of the case. You decide a case. You have to tell us what reasonable means in terms of searches and seizures. You have to help us define restraint of trade after we pass a statute. So, of course, judges make law. But I'm talking about the proper balance. I'll leave you with these last thoughts, and then I'll yield back my time. I want you to hear the words of one of, in my opinion, is one of our most distinguished Supreme Court justices. I'm going to read his words. The American people love democracy, and the American people are not fools. The people know their value judgments are quite as good as those taught in any law school, maybe better. Value judgments, after all, should be voted on, not dictated. I look forward, Judge, to getting to know you better. And congratulations, Mom and Dad.
Thanks, Senator Kennedy. Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Judge Jackson, welcome back to the Senate.
I'd like to ask you real quick, sir, where do you stand? You said last week that this report about migrant families at the border getting payments was garbage.
No, I didn't say that. Let's get it straight. You said everybody coming across the border gets $450,000.
The number was what you had a
The
problem with.
number that I was referring to.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing.
Sure.
If in fact, because of the outrageous behavior of the last administration, you coming across the border, whether it was legal or illegal, and you lost your child, it's gone. You deserve some kind of compensation, no matter what the circumstance. What that will be, I have no idea. I have no idea.
Mr. President, can I follow up on paid leave, Mr. President? Sir, may I follow up on paid leave?
Mr. President, Democratic Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger said of your presidency this week, nobody elected him to the FDR, they elected him to be normal and stop the chaos. How do you view your mandate after Tuesday's election losses for Democrats, and is she wrong?
Well, Abigail's a friend. We had a long talk. She joked and said, and I have a picture, she said, I have a picture of Roosevelt hanging in my office, her office, okay? I don't intend to be anybody but Joe Biden. That's who I am. And what I'm trying to do is do the things that I ran on to do. And look, people out there are ordinary, hardworking Americans, are really, really been put through the ringer the last couple years, starting with COVID. COVID has disrupted almost every family one way or another, whether it's wearing a mask or losing a family member. You know, 750,000 plus Americans dead? 750,000. And so people are worried. People are also worried about, coming up, they don't, understandably. Why is the price of agricultural products, when I go to the store, why is it higher? Like, for example, if we were all going out and having lunch together, and I said, let's ask whoever's in the next table, no matter what restaurant we're in, have them explain the supply chain to us. Think they'd understand what we're talking about? They're smart people, but supply chain. Well, why is everything backed up? Well, it's backed up because the people who supply the materials that end up being on our kitchen table or in our life, guess what? They're closed those plants because they have COVID. They're not, and so it's a complicated world that people are facing. We've never faced anything like this before. I mean, I'm not saying it's the worst of every time in American history, but we never faced anything this sort of defiant of understanding of what's going on. And you can understand why people are upset. And whether you have a PhD or you're working, in a restaurant, it's confusing. And so people are understandably worried. They're worried. And so all I can say is what I'm going to try to do is explain to the American people as best I can. And by the way, you all write for a living. I haven't seen any one of you explain supply chain very well. No, I'm not being critical. I'm being deadly earnest. When your editor says, explain the supply chain. Okay? Lots of luck in your senior years, my coach used to say. But I sincerely mean it. This is a confusing time. Confusing time. Think of all those children who may have lost more than a year of education by only being out one semester. Think of all that's going on in terms of access to everything from when you go back to college, if you're in college, you go back to college, where you have to wear your mask, or who's your roommate? This is a confusing moment. And it seems to me that my job as the President of the United States is to try to figure out, myself as well, what is most needed to put people at ease and let them know there's a way through this. There's a way through this. The world has never been here before. That sounds like hyperbole, but think about it. Think about it. This truly is one of those inflection points in history. All the pieces on the board are moving, both in terms of the relationships among and between nations, as well as the pieces of what employment future people have. How do we do this? And so this is a confusing time, but I promise the American people, I have one focus. How do we give you some breathing room? How do we get you to the point where we take pressure off you so you can begin to get back to a degree of normality and we move to a different place? And this time when we move, and by the way, everybody internationally uses Build Back Better now. When I used the phrase initially, people looked at me like, Build Back Better. Well, what it means, we're the only country in the world gone through a crisis, that goes through a crisis and come out better than we were before the crisis occurred. That's building back better than it was before. And so this is a process. And I just, we're going to see. Take it every day, every moment, one moment at a time.